Good afternoon, councillors and members of staff and members in the gallery. Thank you and welcome to this meeting of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council. I declare it open at 2:02 p.m. Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to our elders past, present, to their elders past, present and emerging. All councillors are present, albeit the Deputy Mayor is running slightly late. He will be arriving shortly. There are no apologies or leave of absence. In attendance, we have senior staff. We have the Director of Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Peter Porch, the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Alex Woodward, Director of Corporate and Community, Ms. Elise Blaine, and the General Manager, Mr. Greg Ingham, and Mrs. Kerr, our Executive Officer. General Manager, agenda item 1.5 are late reports. There's
no late reports.
No late reports. Thank you. Agenda item 1.6, it's a declaration of interest or conflict. The Mayor requests selected members to indicate whether they have one, any interest personally or via a close associate as defined in section 49 of the Local Government Act 1993, or two, any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors in any item included in the agenda. No conflicts. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 2 is the ordinary meeting of council minutes. There is a recommendation on page 6. Councillor Young.
I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on 24 January 2023 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards, thank you. Comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against?
I wasn't present.
It's all right. Motion is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 2.2 is the date and purpose of workshops. Tuesday, the 14th of February. There is a recommendation on page 8. Councillor McQueenie, you were moving.
Yes. I recommend that council notes the information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Churchill, thank you. General Manager, you wish to make a comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, I did receive feedback, valid feedback from a few elected members after the last workshop, and that was around the time and the management of the agenda itself. As you're aware, that is the responsibility of the General Manager, and I must admit that workshop did go on for an extended period of time, particularly a couple of items. It was a full agenda, and that was the reason why we started it an hour earlier than we normally do our workshops, trying to accommodate that. But nonetheless, it still went. So taking that on board and being mindful of the need to leave here at a reasonable hour, there may be in the future occasion to have more than one. We've been trying to stick to one workshop a month. There may be a need to, depending on the workload and what's topical and pertinent at the time, to have more than one workshop in a month. So just making council aware of that, and I can assure you that won't, we'll manage that a lot better going forward, or I will. The item on the agenda on the 14th of February, the review of the council media policy, we didn't really get around to discussing that. So that's going to be added to a future workshop. We just ran out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. I think also it's indicative of the amount of work that councillors and staff actually do in relation to council business. So certainly appreciate your consideration in that. Any other comments in relation to the workshop? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is public question time. General Manager, are there any questions on notice?
No questions on notice, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 3.2 is questions without notice. I'd like to invite Ms. Susan South to speak. I know that there are two questions, one on behalf of Ms Molyneux, who is currently suffering with a loss of voice. Thank you.
The recent fire in the Liz Dillon area has highlighted the amount of dry grass in our area. Of concern is the amount of growth in paddocks along Salmon Strait. A grass fire in that area would affect the Tribunna Township. Also, the dry grass in areas between Orford and Spring Beach is of particular concern for residents of Spring Beach who may need to evacuate in an emergency situation. Much of the growth in this area is obviously a council responsibility as it is on the roadside. My question is, does council have a fire abatement officer and what is their role?
Yes, I can answer that. We do have fire abatement resources at our disposal, and their role is to issue fire abatement notices across the municipality where appropriate. Thank you for your question around and the property that you actually mentioned. There is, as a road controlling authority, we do slash and mow some of our road verges, as does State Growth on the highway. We also are a key member of the Emergency Management Committee. We have a municipal coordinator in our ranks, Mr. Peter Porch. So we are advised by the experts, Tasmanian Fire Services, mainly around fire and fire risk in our municipality. And we take our advice from them around emerging or existing risks.
Money in this year's budget for roadworks along Ribbon Road, in particular Spring Beach?
I will, thank you for that question. I will defer to the Director of Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Peter Porch.
For the benefit of the people, through you, Madam Mayor, there is no specific money in the budget for Ribbon Road this year. There are allocations for operational works, which tend to works that don't extend in value to a capital value. So certainly for a range of general maintenance activities, there is money in for Ribbon Road.
Just sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, if the question relates at all to the underslip, and it may not, there certainly is funding and works allocated for the repairs of that slip.
Is there any time limit when that's going to happen?
Mr. Porch, would you like to?
The works there need to be designed. We had a partial road closure there, which was to aid the geotechnical investigation that needs to occur so that we can get design done for that. Design is progressing with that currently, and I would actually anticipate that there won't be any work commence on that before the next financial year. That would be my best guess.
Thank you for your questions. And may I say, it's delightful to see you ladies back in the chamber in the gallery. Thank you for coming to our meeting.
Can I just add to the Ribbon Road question?
Councillor Edwards, I'm sorry, at this particular junction, there's nothing we can add. Thank you. Mr. Gadd, thank you.
Yes.
That's all.
I want to ask about the ownership of 1 Vickery Street, Tribunna. Apparently it's in the council, Morgan Spring Bay Council's name, and it's not theirs at all. And so I got documents that from the council, they reckon a couple of the owners signed, my father being one of them, and it's definitely not his signature. Now, council's owned it since the 28th of the 9th, 2007. My father was dead over 10 years then, so he couldn't have signed it. And I am the owner of it, but the state government, they negotiated with me to buy 21 square feet of ground off that property when they done the 1200 bridge. Now, I negotiated with them, and I think offhand, I think we've got something like about $1,150 for it. And I took it straight to the RSL and donated it to them. Now, I want to know what the situation is with the council for the ownership of that property, because they definitely do not own it. And if I've got to seek legal action, I'll just have to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd. Gentlemen, did you?
I will have, thank you for that question. I will have to get some advice. This is definitely a matter that has a lot of history around it, as you have alluded to, and certainly a lot of that would have been before my time, but I'd like to get some advice and respond to you and respond to council formally on the questions that you've asked. So we will if we need clarification on the questions, we've made a note, but if we need some clarification to make sure that we answer everything that you've asked, we'll be in contact, but we'll respond within the next month.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gadd.
Question.
One other question, by all means, feel free.
The speed hump down near the Spring Bay Hotel. It's right on the corner, and your front wheels are still on the lock when you go over it. Admittedly, it's a speed that it's only a 20-kilometre-hour speed limit, but you get some overseas visitors or anybody here that they don't realise how quick they're going half of them, and it's raining. Somebody's got to get hurt. Or I'm not against speed bumps, but another 20 metres down the road would have been perfect. It's just in the wrong place.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd. I know Mr. Porch is likely to have a response in relation to that. Is that correct, Mr. Porch?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's no ideal location for that speed hump with the arrangement of parking and associated things going on there. There will be no perfect spot for it. We certainly take your comments on board and would look to continue to monitor how the situation there with that, but we think that that is the best location for it.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just want to make, I think to the contrary, Mr. Gadd, we're trying to improve the safety situation there without installing a formal pedestrian crossing at that location where pedestrians do cross between the gateway and the fish and chip shop and the ice cream shop. It probably wouldn't meet the standards, and it would be more difficult to get a formal pedestrian crossing in there, and also hold up traffic on that corner. So this, we believe, is the best outcome to slow the very vehicles that you mentioned are not slowing down, the tourists that may not be traveling at 40 k's an hour, and to mitigate that conflict between vehicles coming around that corner and people walking between the shop and the marina.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd. Thank you for attending. And I'd like to again thank the members of the gallery for attending our meeting today. And it's been my pleasure to welcome you back into the chamber. I'd like to, at this point, acknowledge that the Deputy Mayor has arrived. And we move on to agenda item 4, which is Planning Authority. And I note that there are no reports in the Planning Authority. Agenda item 5.1 is the financial reports. There is a recommendation on page 12. Councillor Churchill.
Move that council receives the notes, the financial reports as attached to this report for the period ending 31st of January 2023.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Woods, thank you. Any comments or questions on the finance reports? Councillor
I'd just
Churchill?
say, as usual, they're well done, and we've got a nice lot of notes there to explain a whole lot of stuff that we need to explain to really understand those, especially, well, it's all about the P&L in that case, but thank you to financial officers for presenting such a good report.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. There are no section 24 committee minutes at agenda item 6. Next agenda item is 7.1, the Director of Works and Infrastructure's report. There is a recommendation on page 18. Councillor Woods?
Thank you. I'll note that, I'll move that council notes the information.
I have a seconder. Councillor Edwards, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Porch? Councillor Lark?
Peter, I'd just like to clarify the situation with the light pole and power pole assets that's mentioned in there. There's another $1 million close in value that we have to depreciate. Could you just elaborate which lights we're paying for, whether they're lights on Tas network poles, private poles, and the purpose just for ourselves and for the public?
Certainly. Through you, Madam Mayor. So there are a number of different types of poles, and within the Tas networks asset portfolio, I suppose, the ones we don't own, where there is a light on a pole that is in the normal transmission power zone, so it's going to have power lines above. Council pays for the lights through that one only. The poles are owned by Tas Networks, and through the electrical charges, we pay for the number of lights that we have through that system. So that's those, and this is not a part of that. So we have a lot of new subdivisions. You'll find most new subdivisions these days will not have overhead power. So, but they do have lights. So where the power transmission, the power reticulation, does not rely on poles. Tas Networks doesn't have any need for a pole, but council does in illuminating the streets. So the pole that is provided is only a streetlight pole. So those then become council. So for most of your new subdivisions have underground power. The poles there are just for the lights, and so we own the lights and have the responsibility for those. And separate to that, again, like any other property owner who may have transmission lines going past their driveway and have to put in a couple of private poles to get to the building, we have numbers of those installations as well, where we have a number of private poles, generally timber, that transmit the power down to a final location.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments of Mr. Porch on his report? Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that Peter's done, and in particular on page 15, roads, bridges and footpaths and curbs. There's a lot there that's being done, and it's good for us to be able to see that and a good reference point for us. But it's also, being that these documents are public documents, people can actually see what's being done. And I just want to thank and acknowledge the work that Peter and his department do on that front. Thank you.
I think it's fair to say, Councillor Woods, that for a small workforce and a small council, we certainly punch above our weight in getting jobs done.
And I won't digress to anything else because I could, but I won't. And also, if I may, on page 17, Twomley Road rehabilitate to unsealed on the 18th of February nominally. So that road is now a gravel road, gone back to gravel road, which will make it less costly in repair.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We report annually to the state the cost of maintenance and capital on our road network for both unsealed and sealed roads. The unsealed roads cost in the order of $6,000 per kilometre per year to maintain. The sealed roads cost in the order of $9,000 a year per kilometre to maintain.
Looks like we're going back to gravel.
through you, Madam Mayor, it has gone back to gravel.
We're all going back to.
Oh,
gravel.
no, I wouldn't say that yet, but it does make for a easier, the bitumen portion of that road that had failed terribly. You can't put a grader over that. Now at least we can grade the road, we can get a decent crossfall on it, and the road will be in far better condition as a gravel road than it was as a sealed road for the last, I don't know how many years.
40 plus, I think.
Yeah, hopefully not that long.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for Mr. Porch? Put the motion, all those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 7.2 is the report from the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Woodward. There is a report, there is a recommendation on page 21. Councillor Woods, thank you.
I'll move that council receives and notes the report on the activities on the Planning and Development Directorate.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the Director? Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would, on page 19, under Animal Control and Compliance, I note the comments above and thank the officers involved, as I'm sure that this is a very tricky and difficult situation for them to deal with. And I believe that they've been doing a mighty fine job, so it's worthy of noting. And also, I did have and it was in our attachments, seeing the DAs that we've been getting and the information has been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McQueenie.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to the Director, and two directors really. I'm just wondering, in the context of the animal control discussions, which are looking at bird life and the environmental health considerations that Councillor Luck raised around the new wheelchair access area in Swansea and the pathway, how the approval or how the choice of where that actual pathway is came about. So for others, a pathway has been created to allow for access to the beach, which goes through an area which is potentially high bird life.
Certainly, the ramp was through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
The ramp was installed as a private works project for Mayshore. So I believe that Mayshore identified where they wanted the path, and we put it in at their request.
Any further questions or comments? Please make a note that on page 19, there is actually reference to the members of the gallery. There is actually reference to the fire abatement notices that have been issued. There has been 44 issued. Only 14 have been resolved, and officers are currently following up on the unresolved issues. So there has been a number of fire abatement notices issued. So, any other questions or comments for Mr. Woodward? Nothing further. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8.1 is the annual plan and budget. This is community engagement plan for 2023-24, and there is a recommendation on page 23. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you. I'll note, that council endorses the annual plan and budget community engagement plan for 2023-24 as attached to this agenda item.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Councillor Woods, would you like to speak to this motion?
No, thank you. It's pretty
No,
self-explanatory. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Councillor McQueenie?
Yeah, just one thing there regarding.
Councillor McQueenie, could I ask you to move the microphone a little bit closer to you?
Is that better? I might put it to my height too.
It might be causing some audio problems with our live streaming.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
also you speak very quietly.
Yeah, just a comment in terms of looking at future consultation. And I think there's a lot of depth to what we're talking about and a sound approach. But I question whether we need to concentrate some effort too on Buckland in future ones. Their permanent resident population is larger than Coles Bay, but we visit Coles Bay. I appreciate there's issues with attendance, but I'd like to think in the future that we don't forget that that's another major township in our municipality.
Thank you. General Manager, do you wish to make any comment about this?
Thank
Because
you.
I think we've proven in the last week or so that the survey is going to work.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it has been very encouraging to see the response to date. We're only a week in to the survey, so we've got until later in March before it closes. But just in that week, we've had, as of today, 230 odd responses, which represents about 5% of our population. That is significant. At the current level of participation, we could well hit 10% participation, which is pretty damn good when it comes to these sorts of surveys. It's been very interesting to see the preferred methods of engagement. Facebook is obviously the key method that people are engaging with. About 2/3 of all of our engagement of that 230 has been via Facebook and the Survey Link. Then come, the website's popular, the email blast, she calls it, that Eliza did, which was emails just directed to all the contacts that we have, Section 24 committee, chairs and all of that, has also proven to be quite successful. We're getting quality response through that. Mr. Porcher is going to do some engagement at local schools to pick up on some of the younger person's feedback. And we've already spoken to the principals about that. And we've got a bit of a plan there. But all in all, it's been very positive. And I'm sure council's going to have some really good data to work with and assist us in our budget deliberations.
I think too, it's proven that our communities do want to engage with us, but equally we're trying to engage better with our communities. So I think it's giving us, it now is proving to be a good outcome, I think.
Yeah, I think there is.
If I can interrupt you, General Manager, I think we had a hope that we might get 100 responses to the surveys, and we're well in front of that at this point.
That's correct. 100 would have been good, and 100 would have been robust enough data for us to work with.
Yes.
We over doubled that now, and yeah, certainly we're going to be told a story, and that, as well as informing us through our budget process when we do go to the Community Connect sessions in early April. We can go there with community feedback and engage with the people at those sessions on what the communities have told us. So it's going to be really helpful in that regard.
And certainly, Councillor McWhinney, we take your point that we need to engage with the whole community. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments in relation to the annual budget and annual plan and budget community consultation?
I'll just add, I think that we've finally got the way of gathering information in a better balanced position. Previously all Facebook, well, that cuts out anybody over 40 or 50. If it's all on paperwork, well, that cuts out anybody under 30. So now that we're doing a bit of both, we're covering more of the community, and I think that's showing in the results.
And I think we can improve from here.
Yeah, exactly.
This is, if you like, our test event, and we can improve from here in future years. So thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motions. You were for, Councillor Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just saw your hand there when I said against. Sorry. So the motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8.2 is request for event support for the Coles Bay Triathlon for 2023. There is a report. There is a recommendation on page 27. Do I have a motion, please? Deputy Mayor?
I'll move that council. One, notes the partial road closure of the Esplanade, Coles Bay between Coles Bay Road and Jetty Roads between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on Saturday, the 25th of March 2023 for the organiser, Atlas Events Proprietary Limited, to conduct a Coles Bay Half Marathon event and the council advertise the road closure in accordance with policy. And 2, approves provision of support for the application from Atlas Events Proprietary Limited for the Coles Bay Half Triathlon event to the value of $1,500 cash for media and marketing cost support, in-kind support valued at $1,000 to supply wheelie bins and liners and arrange for bin collection after the event on Tuesday, the 28th of March 2023, to waive the advertising fee for road closure, to provide free access to power at Muirs Beach on the grassed area opposite Oluka, and use of council land at the Esplanade, Coles Bay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McQueenie, thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to the motion?
It's another great event for Coles Bay, and it's good that council can be somewhat supportive. It's a signature event on the East Coast, and it just sets a great example for anyone that wants to do those sort of multi-discipline sports.
Councillor McQueenie?
No.
Comment?
No, thank you.
Any
I won't be
comment
participating.
Against the motion? No. Councillor Young?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It is a worthy event, a lot to be said for it. But it's come to my knowledge of recent times, there are about 5 people in this community that are homeless and have nowhere to live. And it seems to me council ought to spend this sort of money towards housing some of the homeless so they don't have to sleep in bus shelters or potting sheds or in places that will soon have to be vacated because of an imminent sale of a caravan park. It's also come to my notice that there is a family living in a tent and they send their kids to the local school. With the amount of money we pay in small grants, worthy they are, though they are, and they do benefit the community, there's no doubt about it, it would finance quite a significant number of portable dwellings. And I happen to have made inquiry as to the cost, where they can be got, and all we need to do is get council to allocate, even on a temporary basis, land upon which these portable dwellings, neat with sewage and water connections and electricity, could be put.
Councillor Young, could I just
So I think
take on board your
Yes.
comments? I'm happy to do that. Take on board your comments. But in the context of this, I think the matter you've raised is a conversation for another day, probably when we're doing our budgeting.
Well, that might be
but
right.
if you
I'm
are-
trying to explain why we should not vote for this motion, because it involves an expenditure of cash, which I think should be better spent. That's the only reason. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any speaker for the motion? Any other comments? Councillor Churchill?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak about the motion.
Yes.
I think, well, last year, for example, we didn't make a cash contribution to this event. And it does bother me, partly for some of the reasons that Councillor Young has just spoken about, but for other reasons as well. Like I do question some of the allocation that we're making at times when we really need to be looking very carefully at our budgets. Well, I will support this motion as it's been put. However, I do have a certain amount of discomfort with the handing out of reasonably large amounts of money that I think we need to be looking at a little bit more carefully in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, Councillor Edwards?
I'd like to support the $1,500 donation unequivocally. I think the people that brings to town, to Coles Bay, the money they spend in the shops, the staying at accommodation, buying food, buying drinks, all puts money into the economy, which helps people jobs. some of these people who are currently homeless may be able to get a job or get some assistance through that. And I think these sorts of things should be encouraged. The homeless thing, I think, is a completely different issue.
Councillor McQueenie.
Yeah, just thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to say that I too look forward to the discussion of homelessness in the budgeting process.
Thank you.
Because it's,
So,
I too look forward to a discussion about homelessness in the budgeting process.
so Councillor Young, taking on board your comments, the General Manager, I'd like to ask you to make some comments.
I think Councillor Edwards probably covered off on what I was going to say. There's a lot of, I think council must just be cognizant of what we can't outline in this report to the dollar, but that's the intangible benefits that events like this bring to our municipality, and they would not be insignificant. This report is a little bit unique in that for the first time we've outlined. So there's the 1,500 cash contribution, but we've also outlined the in-kind support. It's an estimate, but it's there or thereabouts, just to give councillors an idea about what we provide in kind. There's flexibility here for council to do anything with any event, but yeah, I just encourage you not to lose sight of the significant, intangible and unquantifiable in many cases benefits that accrue from an event like this in our municipality.
Thank you. With no other further, if there's no further comments or questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Young is against. The motion is carried 7-1. Thank you. Agenda item 8.3 is the Coastal Infrastructure Asset Management Plan. There is a recommendation on page 31. Councillor Churchill.
I move that council adopt the revised version of the Coastal Infrastructure Asset Management Plan.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Young. Thank you. Councillor Churchill, do you wish to speak?
Well, we've got 3 asset management plans coming in this meeting, and I'll probably speak to all of them at one point, and probably just not now until I hear a bit more conversation in the room to see, get other people's views.
Would you like to close debate then shortly, Councillor? Are there any other questions or comments in relation to the Coastal Infrastructure Asset Management Plan? If I may, I'd just like to note that there's some really good comments there on all of our asset management plans from the audit panel review, and I would just like to, the audit panel reviewed the asset management plans, and I would just like to thank the audit panel for that work that they undertook on that. Councillor Edwards.
It says there's a low risk that MAST will not provide funds for asset renewal as replacement is required. How low is the risk that they won't fix the sandbags? Or how high is the risk?
Mr. Porch, is this you, Mr. Porch, to answer this question, or the General Manager?
I think, well, through you, Madam Mayor, I think sandbags aside, I think general coastal infrastructure or marine infrastructure, it's a highly unlikely, there is a low risk that MAST wouldn't continue to fund the upgrades and the additions to that. And that's funded mainly through the boating charges, the boating levies. The sandbags is at the Prosser mouth is, I guess, another story and quite a complex one, I suppose. So what, we don't even know at this point as to what, I noticed the channel on this weekend, actually. I noticed a boat going out there this weekend and how narrow the channel had got, particularly with sand depositing from the Millingtons Beach end. And I thought, wow, how much longer before it's completely closed? That is not something certainly that, as you know, council should be getting involved in, but I don't know what MAST's plans are at this point in time either.
May need a discussion with them.
Any other questions or comments? Motion for or against? Councillor Churchill, do you wish to close debate on this or? No.
No, I'm quite comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8.4 is the Building Asset Management Plan. There is a recommendation on page 35. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you. I'll move that council adopts a revised version of the Building Asset Management Plan and considers the implications in upcoming review of the long-term management plan.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Councillor Woods, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I will reserve for closing.
Thank you. Speaker for or against? Councillor McQueenie?
I guess general comments. So one of the things I think, one of the comments is simple, and it's about accuracy of the plan. Within the plan, the current vision that's stated, and I think it's across a number of the asset management plans, isn't our latest vision. And that's important. I think that we are including the latest one. And just to remind folk, the latest one is we want Glamorgan Spring Bay to be prosperous, vibrant and inclusive, a place where people want to live, work and visit. And so whilst, as councillors are aware, no surprise, I'm going to raise the issue of inclusive and what we do about that. Now, I appreciate that's a broader discussion than just this plan, but I think it's important to note that the current plan probably does what many other documents in the council do at the minute, and it doesn't deal with how we realise that strategic objective of inclusiveness, particularly around disability, particularly in things like buildings, etc. And because it doesn't have that strategic link, which is part of an asset management plan development, we don't have measures, we don't have data, and we don't have resources. Now, I note that the plan talks about doing that work. So I've got a question about that in a second, but what I would like to see in the improvement plan of this plan itself is that we look to do something perhaps more detailed about that step in the planning process, which is establishing levels of service, where it talks about aligning with strategic links so that we have that input about our strategic priorities in what we are actually presented with. So I don't have an issue with the content of the plan, other than I think that there's room within the improvement plan to talk about levels of service, about what are the criteria for acquisition, because that's what bringing all our facilities up to speed will require if we decide to do it. But I appreciate the content and the significant work that's actually gone into this too. And it's a really good start for then deciding what we might do next. But my question is, given the discussion in here about needing to do, because we don't have a full audit of those facilities for all abilities access, and we don't have costings for them, so we can't include that in the plan, nor can we advise others where we might seek grants. What's the sort of plan for realising that part of the plan that says we're going to do that work?
Thank you. General Manager, do you wish to
Thank you,
respond?
through you, Madam Mayor. The asset management plan is a plan to manage assets that we have already on our books. So it's existing built assets that we have a responsibility to maintain, renew, etc., to ensure that they see out their serviceable lives and can meet the needs of the community. We do, as you correctly pointed out, Councillor McQueenie, we do need to do a full audit on all of our facilities around inclusiveness, but specifically around all abilities access. And that is something that council will have to do, and I'll be recommending that we do in the near future, that we do have at least an idea of, we know for a fact that several of our facilities don't meet standards. We need to know what that is, what that looks like. Some of the facilities in this building asset management plan, for example, do have all abilities access. So for example, some of our community halls have got wheelchair ramps and stuff like that. A lot of our toilets have got disabled access in the toilets. So they already exist within the plan, and that plan is purely about what we know now. It's as you've heard the director say often, it's a point in time. This is what we got now. As soon as the Bicheno Triangle gets built and there's a new building on our books, that gets added to the asset management plan, and on we go, ensuring that we're maintaining what we have. We do need to take, this council does need to, like many others in the state, needs to take ownership of all people in our municipality in terms of their access and accessibility. Just like we need to do with climate change. We haven't even touched on climate change as a council. It's a big issue in the state and in the world. Again, we have to allocate resources and allocate and change our thinking to be more cognizant of climate change in the future. So I think during the budget process, this is a worthy discussion during the budget process. If we decide as a council that a good step in the right direction around ability access would be a municipal-wide audit of all our assets, then that's what council can do. It's going to require resources. It's going to require, it certainly wouldn't be something we'd be able to do internally. It's going to require experts in the field, but that's certainly something that council can do.
So, sorry. you go.
Yep, no.
So, thank you. But can I just clarify, and I appreciate you might be able to give specifics, but when we say on page 6 of the plan or 79 of the pack, we're going to identify upgrades required to meet the current accessibility standards and ensure they're included in the planned budget. Which preparatory budget cycle are we likely to be in before we do that? Because it's talking about knowing that information to contribute to a planned budget. Is that with the timeframe you're imagining that we might be able to do that audit of what's there? Will that be for this next budget cycle, an input or an output?
Through Madam Mayor, that would be, given the time frame, I think that would be a 24-25 budget consideration.
Thanks for the answer.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments in relation to the? Councillor, would you wish to close debate then?
You can close it.
Right.
It's all closed.
It's all
Yes,
closed?
thank you.
Thank you.
No, I've got nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8.5 is the hydraulic infrastructure asset management plan, and there is a recommendation on page 40. Thank you.
I move that council adopts the hydraulic infrastructure asset management plan 2023 and considers the implications of the funding shortfall in the review of the long-term financial plan and the 23-24 budget development.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Young, thank you. Councillor Churchill, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Yes, I will briefly. I may also or may not wish to close it as well. Well, I again refer to what the Mayor spoken to earlier, the recommendation from the audit panel and the acknowledgement of the work that's gone into it and the appropriate development of all of these plans, I think, has been really worthy of note. And this one particularly has built into it a lot of what I would call compromise. There's a, it's quite clear that our budgets can't handle everything that we would like to do. If we were to try to do everything that's needed within our assets and our maintenance and renewal, the gold standard required would have a serious impact on ratepayers at a point in time. But I think strategically this has been done so well to distribute some of that pressure over time, that that needs to be acknowledged and pointed out to the community. This particular one, I think, I stand corrected if I've got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the budget allocation for this is only about 80% of what is required to bring all of these hydraulic assets up to the standard that we would all like to see. So I just don't believe that we could be better prepared asset management wise, and I'm now talking across all 6 asset management plans. I don't think we could be much better prepared and to be in a better situation, given that the first of these was seriously done 2 years ago. And this is just a further development of that, or as one of the external members of the audit panel used the word maturity. And I think we're going through a process of maturing here and learning how to manage assets, that some of which we didn't even know we had until recently. So I'd just like to thank, all the officers who worked on these asset management plans, and particularly Mr. Porch. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Speaker against the motion?
I'd just like to
Councillor Young?
commend Mr. Porch. He does a very good job. I have trouble reading his lengthy reports, but with a lot of sweat and hard work and guidance from the missus at home, I can comprehend it, and thank you very much. It does affect me because before Mr. Porch came to town, I spent over $2,000 fixing the suspension on my car that was wrecked, generally because of the condition of some of our infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Porch.
Thank you. Any other comments? If I may, I'd just like to make one comment, and it is on page, page 37 of the report. It refers to the Prosser Plains Raw Water Scheme infrastructure, and that is more locally known as the Tassal Pipeline. And I think it's important to note that we've actually removed that from this particular asset class because it is self-sustainable, and so it's going to sit outside the infrastructure that has to be funded by community funds, aka the rates. So I think it's really important. That's a really important point to make, that the Prosser Plains Raw Water infrastructure is not funded through this process. Councillor Churchill, I believe you moved the motion. Do you wish to close debate if there's no further comments?
Oh, no, I think I've had enough
You
to say.
think
Thank you very much.
On that basis, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to agenda 8.6, which is a community small grant application for Mariah Voices. And I would just point out here that a community small grant application is different to the one that we dealt with earlier, which was an event support application under a different funding process. So there is a recommendation on page 43. Yes, Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor. I will move that council approve the application for the community small grants funding of $1,000 to Mariah Voices Incorporated.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards, thank you. Councillor Woods, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Nothing other than to say that these are a great group of people, and this is going to be it's well deserved.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, do you wish to make a comment?
Just like to second Councillor Wood's comments. It's a very active group who are terrific in the community, turn up to local events, and it's just all positive.
Certainly are. Are there any other comments, questions? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't support this motion It's many years since I've been in a choir. I was in a choir once. And it's a worthy thing that they're doing. But the homeless need housing, and we've got to spend every cent we've got on it until they're housed. The cash we've allocated so far in this meeting for these sorts and events and small grant applications, if repeated every year, would fund a capital cost of 35,000. If we do it every 10 meetings, it'll fund 350,000. I've made inquiries. It'll produce over 3 dwellings if we have the land to put them on, and it wouldn't take long to do. I have a feeling about it. It's not usual for me to have these sort of feelings.
Thank you.
Feel strongly
Your
about it.
comments are noted, councillor.
you.
Thank you. Councillor Woods, would you like to close debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge councillor Young's comments with regards to the homeless, and sadly, that's a fact of life in every community. And, you know, I know and I believe that council will do what it can for those that are struggling. However, we can't lose, that needs to be in our mind, but we can't lose sight of the fact of what community groups do for our communities as well. Totally understand and appreciate and support what you're saying. But sadly, I was unaware of homeless people here. So this is all news to me today. But I just wanted to acknowledge what you're saying, but I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Woods has closed debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Young is against. The motion is carried 7-1. Agenda item 9 is notices of motion, and there are nil petitions at agenda item 10. There are nil questions on notice by councillors. Agenda item 12 is moving into closed session in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. With the requirements of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, the Mayor is to declare the meeting closed to the public in order to discuss the following matters. The minutes of the closed session of the ordinary meeting on the 24th of January 2023. Do I have a motion to move into closed session? Councillor Young.
I move that council moves into closed session at 1 minute to 3 p.m.
2:59. Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Do I have a seconder, please? Seconder, Councillor Edwards. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Mrs. Kerr will confirm that the recording has been terminated. And at this point, I need to thank the members of the gallery for your attendance and